All right, back with another Bad Runner's Take with my dude Brian Wolf Runner Peterson, coming to you from Arizona. I'm in France, and as you listen to this, you are possibly on a road trip. You're moving about the country, somewhere in the world. You're driving. Maybe you're on a holiday run. And so today, in honor of the holiday, at least for you Americans, we're talking Thanksgiving. We're talking thankful. We're talking about an angle on trail running that other sports do that trail running currently doesn't do, that we think could be cool if they did. And for those of you around the world who don't celebrate Thanksgiving, like France, because Thursday Thanksgiving in France is just a school day for my kids. So a lot of you, this is just another episode coming out on a Friday. Okay, I'm going to tee up the question, Brian, and then you put, I'll give you the frame and you build the house around it. I love this. You said our sport goes dark at a time when a lot of other professional sports turn up the volume, and maybe a lot too. But of the big four, two really turn up the volume. We've got NFL and NBA going big for the holidays, and trail running gets quiet. There's many arguments I think that could be made for trail running getting louder or getting quieter. But currently what we do is we get quieter, and there's not a lot going on in the world of trail. And so today we look at NFL, NBA, leveraging the eyes and ears of people who are laying around, enjoying their time with their family. And so they put it on display. How am I doing it? Am I on the right path with what's on your mind?
Yeah, spot on, man. So, yeah, I mean, being a big sports guy growing up, you always kind of, mark the calendar. You knew the traditions, right? The NFL Thanksgiving Day game with John Madden. They had the turducken.
The turkey, yes.
The big
Well,
turkey
like the six-legged turkey thing, yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, see what I mean? Like, you don't even have to say much of anything, and everybody kind of knows and, remembers.
Smiles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You had the Lions always losing, and, and then you go to...
It's America at its best.
And it seems like, the NBA's kind of really owned the Christmas holiday game. You typically have Boston versus Lakers on Christmas Day. And I mean, it just kind of complements the holiday and becomes a tradition built around it for sports and, building more fans throughout the season. So it just got me thinking could we have something like that? Do we have the ambition and imagination to create something within trail, and if we did, what would it look like? So I mean, this is just a fun spitball episode to throw ideas out, and I got to thinking to throw in another sport as comparison. Anybody that remembers NASCAR driving days like in the 90s with Earnhardt and everything, they had a IROC race, which was International Race of Champions. And the whole thing was that it was on an oval track. They all drove the same Camaro. They had, an IROC version, again, International Race of Champions. But this wasn't just NASCAR drivers. This was Indy drivers, Formula One, and NASCAR. So you had guys who were competing across different race series coming together, and they kind of neutralized everybody's advantage and put them in the exact same stock car. It was super cool, right? So why couldn't we kind of have around a holiday or something the same kind of vibe? You could have people from the sub-ultra scene racing against, people in the 100-mile scene on some type of course that kind of complements both of their suits. And it would just be fun. I mean, it wouldn't be for anybody's legacy, but it would be something to give back to the fans. So what do you think? How would you play that out?
I gotta catch up with you. And how do I say this? Everything that you just said is exactly why we should have something for our spot on that day, because everything that you brought up, there's some level of fondness that endears me more to the sport. Cowboys fan growing up, I came by it honestly. I lived in Fort Worth. I'm not like these Cowboys fans who've never been there. So I loved the Cowboys, and so Thanksgiving Day meant I got to see them start to finish. What made me feel special as a Cowboys fan is that it didn't matter who the Cowboys were playing, it was the Cowboys Day, and so then it could be a different opponent, it could be the 49ers, the Packers. There was some level of predictability, but I look back on it with fondness. IROC, to be honest with you, my fondness for that is, do you remember that song Teenage Dirtbag?
Yeah.
that's the first time I ever heard of an IROC because he drives an IROC, and it's like in the video, it shows
Right.
the IROC or whatever.
That was my first car. It was a 1989 Chevy
You're
IROC.
kidding.
Yeah.
Was it in good shape?
Not when I got it, but yeah, we put a little bit of elbow grease into it and got it looking pretty killer for a 17-year-old in high school. Yeah.
Did you have a mullet?
No mullet at the time. No, I was frosted spikes. Your typical late '90s, 2000.
Yeah. Listening to Smash
guy.
Mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Dude, that's incredible to have an IROC. I would love. So I also get the other end of it of like, hey, it's the holiday. It's nice, MLB, those players, they get to have holidays with their families. That's nice. But at the same time, if you're a professional, that's somewhat just how it goes.
Here's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to be live. They could record it and package it in a way that you can actually just debut and watch it live in a live chat environment. So you still get the community of the live chat. The athletes aren't having to sacrifice family time, and it looks polished, and it's something that you could share with your family members who aren't running fans in a 45-minute, hey, check this out. Let's get together and watch this after you guys are all, tired from the turkey and pie. And I don't think it has to be live.
I'm sold. I think that's absolutely brilliant. And so with that, you open yourself up to these baller production companies. And I think we have baller production within trail running in terms of post event. We have baller production. Shout out to Drew Darby, Billy Yang, obviously. It's our in-sport coverage that is growing, is not there yet. And every year it's getting better. We've acknowledged that, but it's not there yet. So if post is where we shine as a sport, how do we get Drew? How do we get Billy? How do we get my dude Ben, who does my documentaries? How do we get them to do a major Thanksgiving Day release? I think that would be a really fun 2025 goal for anybody to say, hey, what if those of you who don't like those main sports, what if we gave you something 2 hours that day? That's like, we're going to live stream it at 2:30 Central Time, pre or post, whenever you eat. You're worn out, and you're going to get the documentary of the year, the coverage of the year. You establish the storylines early on of who of your big favorite races, your UTMB, your Western States, and you somehow thread that through to one like magnum opus for the year. I don't know. I mean, I could imagine where the money comes from. I don't necessarily know off the top of my head, because that'll be expensive and pricey, but what a gift to humanity. Absolutely. To drop it in that way. I love that.
Yeah. Like you said.
And if it's live with the chats and stuff, you could probably, you would dominate there because, like you said, it's so quiet. You could own the sport that day.
You could. Yeah. And I think it would get good. It would get good adoption. Everybody would kind of get excited about it because you could market it, a couple weeks beforehand, just like Golden Trail Series does really well with marketing their drops and their recap stories. So I don't know. Yeah. Mountain Outpost or Out and Out House, they've got all the content. They do all the live streams for all these big races throughout the year. So they could easily, curate something, if there wasn't the budget or the scheduling to come together for this event. They could still put together a year-end review of what they've done across these golden ticket races and Western. And they're just sitting on a landmine of content, you know?
Yeah. And if it's, especially if it's this mutually agreed upon thing we're going to try, and if there's money involved, you can figure out licensing. But if it's like, hey, Mountain Outpost, you've got X content that we need. This production company has this content. We'll figure out the licensing. We'll figure out the paperwork. But let's grab the best of the best and have that day as like our own parade. This is our parade that day. This is our Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade.
Yep.
And let's get 1 million people on this thing. I think you could do it.
Yeah. And it would be, again, priorities would be fun and fondness and the fans, right? Like the 3 F's basically. You would do things that would sacrifice the performance of the athlete for the product, right? We would actually, have them with live microphones, so you could hear them, in and out, right? It would be the environment that you could kind of beta test things for future live streams and see, because it's, again, we're we're not trying to put on like, it's not like the performance isn't what matters. It's just for the fondness and the connection to it. So you could do things that would be super fun.
I almost hate that we're having this discussion publicly because I want to do all this, but okay. So, the NFL microphone, the candid whatever, like that they put on a player for a week or even a season, or, on some of those like receiver or quarterback Netflix documentaries, like you have them in game. You know how amazing it would be to hear what Jim is saying? Not even at the aid station, because we can kind of, we have some frame of reference for that. But if we could hear like his mile 38 discussion halfway between aid stations, what does he talk out loud? Does he say stuff? Or if they pick up pacers, I don't think there's too much like strategy going on. Like there's not discussion that's like proprietary or, it's not like a huddle. But if we could get like even just some audio on that, I think people would, they would love that. I mean, the challenge would be, finding the lightest weight, most non-intrusive microphone possible.
Right.
That to me I would be glued. If someone would have to go through 13 hours, 15 hours of stuff to find it, chop it up into 4 minutes. That's the best, most interesting 4 minutes. Here's Jim. This is what he said. He spoke for 4 minutes total for an entire race. That would be content that I would get so pumped on.
Yep. And like the desire, the appetite for it is there, because when you think about like the North Face 50 Hawks versus Zach Miller, Jamil dropped like the unedited raw content when like all you hear is just Zach like, huffing and puffing. Like you don't have to hear anything to get the chills and want to go out and run intervals up a hill because you're watching and hearing it. Right. And like, you got him looking over his shoulder and he's asking Billy, like, how far back is he? Like, again, these are moments that stick with you and last. Like, I can't imagine how much good, like, pacer content there is, right? Because I imagine these pacers have some of the best motivational speeches out there for their athlete, constantly lifting them up like they're Rocky in the corner, right? Like giving them the win one for the Gimper speech on the trails. So I want to hear what the pacers say too, to talk up their athlete.
Wow. Okay. Let's take it up a notch. What if we were able to, let's say we got this content and it's this stuff, because you're exactly right. It's the pacers. So not every runner has a pacer, but let's say they do. So I guess you couldn't do it at UTMB. That's fine. They get all the coverage. You've got the pacer carrying the mic. You're getting these epic, get you pumped speeches. And so we drop into whoever wants to do it. I bet we could get 25 cities to do this, where you have a group that watches it together, and then you have an official turkey trot right after that.
Right.
Maybe year one is turkey trot without that, so we can have like a baseline to assess how pumped it gets people.
Right.
And then year two, it's do this coverage, and now same people go run that same turkey trot and see if, I bet they're running like 1.25x last year's times, because you'd be so pumped. If you're getting those speeches and if you're getting those like the huffing and puffing stuff, I know that I'm getting pumped while watching it, knowing I'm about to go run a 5K where I can just redline, or a 10K where I can just redline. That would be so motivating, and it'd be fun. Then like talk about like a community engagement on steroids, and then you've got more money available to make the great documentary, because now you're activating community around the world.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think
I would do that.
Yeah. And I think we're kind of touching around like the main issue here is that like, I think trail running's lost some of its fun, some of its playfulness, right? Like I think in an effort, like for what Debo is doing with Free Trail and, the other podcasters that, carry a large platform and are doing, more commentary spaces or athlete interviews, like they kind of moved away from like the Bill Yang and like the Trail Runner Nation, like these kind of like podcasts, right? And they tried to present themselves as ESPN, right? Like they always wanted to be elevated, right? More polished or professional, right? Like, and I think they lost a lot of the fun aspect that made fans connect to the content from like the previous generation of media. Like, it reminds me of like when Jamil came up, right? Like his channel on YouTube got big because he was doing like Casey Neistat style daily vlogs when he was training for Barkley. And then him and what was his name? Schuster. They always go out and do those like eating challenges with, like the drop bag challenge. You know what I mean? Like Jamil would.
I kind
You
of
don't
remember
remember?
that.
Okay, so they would do these like events where Aravaipa would have all these drop bags that nobody would claim, and so they would go out and just grab random drop bags, and they would start eating whatever was in the drop bag. You know what I mean? Like, so they would be forced to consume whatever gels or food.
Yeah.
Right. So they would do these fun jackass style challenges that were like hilarious, right? Or they would make the most hideous concocted goo formula that they could out of these goos that got left behind, and then they would go run up a mountain here and eat the gels and try not to puke. So we've lost all the fun.
That's good.
It's just now a bunch of interviews.
Was Jamil the one doing the? Yeah. Okay. Don't let me deviate too far from that because I got to get back to that. But I am curious. Was Jamil the one? I recall a fun video where someone was going after Jim Walmsley's across Arizona, would be traveling around trying to take his segments off of Strava.
Yes.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah,
I remember that being really fun.
Yeah, and they did one time around. Actually, now that I remember, they did one around Christmas, and they dressed up as Santa Claus, and they were running up and down. I think it might have been Pemberton or one of the local trailheads down here in Phoenix and stuff. But yeah, they were targeting specific Walmsley segments where like they could go all out for like 0.6 miles, whereas it was like Jim getting the segment in like a 16-mile trail run. So it was fun. They were poaching his segments and having fun with it and stuff. So,
okay, and you are right.
We've lost the fun.
The fun is missing.
It's not missing entirely. It's just now it's a little bit adjacent to trail. I think what Matt Johnson's doing, and what some of these other hybrid athletes. I said the H word, so forgive me for that. But some of these hybrid athletes or influencers, they're still having the fun and they're reaping the benefits of a greater platform and audience. So there's some correlation.
I mean, okay. Where I would say what I mean by the fun is gone is that, yes, you said it well, it's adjacent. It's not in the driver's seat. And I want to think out loud about why it's not in the driver's seat anymore. Is it, did Jamil, who was in the driver's seat on some of that, Billy, who was in the driver's seat on some of that fun, but maybe Jamil more so, was it just because the business got so big, the revenue got so much, Aravaipa became so much, and then Mountain Outpost, and then did he invest in Satisfy and all this sort of stuff? Like, did all of that just get to the point where he was just a manager of a large enterprise, which is fine because no judgment, just observational. And then so the fun stuff, it became too risky, or did he just lose the appetite? Did he just lose the energy? All of those could be possible, but whatever it is, there's no one that is in the old box. So you do well to say the hybrid athletes are owning that. They are much more fun than our sacred trail personalities. Our sacred trail personalities seem to be delivering on the facts. Let me say the facts. They're delivering on information. They're giving us. They're dispensing information that they think that people want, or not even think that people want. They're dispensing information that people want, and that is the most unsexy explanation I could ever give for something. Yes, dispensing information that people want. That's true, but man, as far as the turkey with 6 legs and the turducken and we don't have those things to grab onto right now.
No. And I think Jamil just eventually, this was probably we're going on 2025 now. So this was 2015 era. So this would have been 8 to 10 years ago. So we grow up, we get older, right?
Totally.
I think, his buddy moved away. So it was probably something fun that he enjoyed doing with his friend. Right. And it was kind of well, if it's not him, then I don't want to continue doing it just for the sake of doing it. It was sincerely something fun to do with him. And I think time just moved on, and rather than tapping somebody on the shoulder and saying, hey, this is still an important part of Aravaipa and everything, let's keep the channel growing. It just it died with Jamil rather than having him anoint maybe somebody else within the Aravaipa kingdom to take that place.
Take that over. But there's a gap.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll just throw this out there. There's something I'm working on that I would not have articulated this way before. But yes, this is what I'm doing because I loved all that stuff. That stuff brought a ton of people into the sport. That stuff brought people like you and me into the sport. The version of content now brings really I think it's more attractive to the people who are trying to really professionalize the sport. So that dispensation of information is really attractive to that aspiring elite athlete or that person who's building the brand because they want to get in that. But the fun stuff is missing. And that's one of the things I'm trying to build right now at a very high level called Roby House for Western states. It's essentially coverage. I've been saying it as what if David Letterman had a baby with Jackass and it was a non-elite runner? Like I want to build this experience, launch it at Western states, but I hope to do it at a lot of different events in the future. But the idea is just that we go out and I wouldn't have said this way until you've said what you've said in this episode so far. It's simple. Just have fun. Like, let's make sure that people see how much fun this is, or people who already know how much fun it is, give them another thing to point at and say, this is fun.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I'm excited for that. You've given me little cues on to what you're working on. So yeah, everybody keep your eyes open and I'm sure more
should be good
as you've got. Yeah.
Could be good.
So yeah, okay. On some good stuff here. I didn't know how excited we'd get about the opening topic. I knew it was one that I was excited about, but glad to see that you ripped off it and had fun with it as well.
Definitely love it. Okay, here's a thought, and you take if you can go this way if you want to, or you can counter with a different direction. Like looking at gratitude and thankfulness within the sport. I've got some thoughts, some things that I'm thankful for within the sport, and you can frame it, and simply because it is Thanksgiving, we can frame it that way. You can frame it of just like stuff that you love within the sport. But looking back at 2024, we're 11/12 of the way there. Anything come to mind for you?
Thankful for this opportunity. Certainly been having a blast the last couple of weeks or months now that we've been doing shared
That's crazy.
Bad Runners Take. So started off organically just with me messaging you these similar takes and thoughts in the messages, and then invited me on. And I think we're building and growing this into something bigger, and hopefully maybe even get a Wolfie's World segment in there in Borders Land on its own. So maybe in the future we'll see.
Yeah, in fact, I'm gonna call that a commitment that we have something called Wolfie's World coming. The exact concept is still taking shape, but you will hear an episode before the end of the year, episode 1 of Wolfie's World before the end of the year. I'm committing to it publicly. In the survey that you all took, and I hope I'm going to have it in the show notes too. I want to continue to learn. I want to get to a critical mass in the survey. I'm pretty close on stuff, but you all like these episodes the most, which is pretty incredible. And that's men and women both sharing that. Well, actually, a unique thing about every single woman who took that survey, every single one of them named Bad Runners Take as one of their top 2 favorite things about the podcast. So I like this because
was that just our wives that filled that out?
Yeah, I meant to say both of the women that took this. So I like this. I mean, it's I had the vision of wanting to talk about current events and have like a counter or I don't know, just a new take on things. But when you came in, it became like it felt like this dog could hunt. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I don't think I would have. I love this concept. I wouldn't have had the energy to put it together. So like these topics each week are, these are essentially of coming from your imagination and what you're paying attention to. You pay much, I don't say much closer attention, but the way that you consume this sport is unique, and it feels like I don't know how you do it. You bring in information from so many different angles and distill it into like really interesting conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the concept of Bad Runners Take works best with 2 people because that's kind of how you would naturally talk in a bar or, at a barbershop or whatever
Totally.
Your communal gathering is with your buddy, right? You riff off of things and you kind of laugh. And then before you know it, like the Bad Runner Take got, kind of carved into something that's actually a pretty damn good take half the time. So
yeah. And because we're saying it out loud, and like you say, because there's two of us and we're bouncing off each other. No, I completely agree with that.
What do you
What's
think
that?
for 2024? What's been some of the highlights for you, or you had a big move and within the sport, what do you got going on?
Yeah, I think on some levels, like this move to Paris has been really, really good. That because I can't get distracted. Ironically, it's allowed me to dream about what I'm trying to build within the sport of trail running without being distracted by the sport of trail running, if that makes sense. Like if I was in America, I would be training a lot more, running a lot more, trying to run more races, which sounds like it should be a good thing. But in some levels, the amount of time that I would give to that, I've been giving to building Borderlands, to building the app Wilder, to dreaming up the the events that we have in Salt Lake City, getting this Billy Yang run together for January of next year. So, for me on that level, it's like Paris is an extremely inspiring place, and I'm taking all of that inspiration and it's all coming out in the form of like trying to build these things so that when we come back to America, it's like hit the ground running. And I'm super excited for it. I would say one of the surprises of the year was just a high level of stoke for Cirque Series. Getting to have Julian Carr on the podcast. I think this year one of the takeaways, and it's been through our conversations, is I've gotten really excited about shorter distances. And I have also gotten excited about wanting to try to run faster. That's never really been the thing for me. But as we've talked about it, and then having Jacob Pusey on the podcast and getting to talk about his take on road running this year, my imagination really in the last half year has opened up and gotten excited for running on the road and shorter distances. And what I like about that is that means it's like, yes, trail running and ultra running, my heart is attached. I hope to run 100 more 100 milers. Like that is a high value to me. But my imagination has been opened up for the entirety of the sport. And maybe even further than imagination, just my affinity for it, my respect for it, my love for it. And so I think that's one of the great surprises of this year that I wouldn't have seen coming. I would have thought I would just been an old dirtbag trail guy for the rest of my life. But I feel excited at the thought of trying to run 830 miles at the Paris Marathon. That's a huge challenge for me to contemplate that across 26 miles. But I'm motivated by speed. I haven't been motivated by speed until we started having our conversations and looking at Golden Trail, thinking Cirque. And what I love about Cirque being that special event series is just that it's a party. That is fun. Cirque Series is fun.
Right.
And that team makes it fun. And at the same time, there's elites that come out and destroy those 6 to 9 mile courses. Yeah, so that's it for me. I think that's one of them for me. Just a big imagination for this sport, and wanting to bust down the gates and make sure get all the gatekeepers out of the way and make sure that we are continuing to go forward and deeper into the sport, and more people being welcome, and more people loving road running who love trail and shorter distances and longer distances and everything.
Yeah, that kind of actually teased me up for something that I'm grateful for. I wouldn't have anticipated it, but this year will be the first year probably since 2016 that I haven't ran an ultra distance race. And it happened organically. I knew coming into this year that it was going to be kind of a more balanced year of family priorities and being more involved in pouring some energy back into the house and some things that we've been putting off. So, but I fully expected to still be, maybe running Javelina or, some other Aravaipa ultra distance, whether it was a 50K or 50 miler. But yeah, here we are middle of November and didn't happen. There was a 50 miler I was going to run here locally, but my wife, found a fixer upper, an RV trailer, and bought it on the spot. And spent the last couple of weeks just, gutting it, at a breakneck pace. And she goes into her hobbies and her passions with the same kind of grandiose that we as ultra runners go into ours. And so I can't knock her for, wanting to go from busted up trailer to, fully remodeled in 7 days and then take it to California for a weekend. And, I've never towed a trailer before, learned how to do anything. So I was just, drinking through the fire hose and all of that to say, it's nice to know that like you don't have to run ultra distances to still very much identify as a trail runner, identify with the community of ultra runners. Like I know there's a lot of guys out there that reach out and it's like they feel like when they're not running ultra distance or don't have a race signed up, like they feel
lost,
not as authentic of exactly. They feel lost. And just to speak to anybody out there, like, no, man, like I didn't run an ultra this year, and like I'm every bit as committed to the sport and the community, and still running, and still identify every bit of a trail runner, ultra runner, road runner, just as much as I did during my biggest volume years and everything else.
Have you surprised yourself? Let me ask you this: on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you mean that compared to how much are you just trying to speak it into existence? Meaning, do you legitimately feel that you are a part of the community, that this is you with going a whole year without running a race? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For me, I'd be saying it to try and speak it into the existence because it's really hard for me here. But what about you?
Yeah, no, it's sincere, because I still because what matters always most to me is just being able to run consistently. So I can still go out and run during the week. I can still go out, a couple times a month and run on trails so I can get that sensation. Right. And it just showed that like, the races, they are important to me, but they, at the end of the day, don't matter nearly as much as being able to just train. So it's as sincere as the words coming out of my mouth. Like it was something that, looking back, it's not a difficult thing. It's not like I'm going to then try to emulate it next year. No, like next year, I'm more fired up than ever to go run a race at an ultra distance. But if it doesn't happen, then I know I'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think my final thing I'm thankful for this year, I mean, my dude, Joshua Landvatter, did the classic Grand Slam of Ultra. And I just absolutely loved that that's still possible. And I think it's a relic. And I can't imagine how many more people are going to be able to do it. He did the version of the Grand Slam that includes Western States, Wasatch, Vermont, and the other one. But he didn't do Leadville. I mean, it's impossible to do the Grand Slam with Leadville unless you are a sponsored elite at this point.
Gotcha.
So he just finished his PhD in some form of psychology. So he's a relic. I don't know how many more people are going to get to do it, but it was a blast to see. Like, one of those 100-milers is still a active horse race. And so he ran with horses, and then he got to do, he lives in Salt Lake, so he got to do Wasatch, but then to actually have, pulled a lottery ticket and got to do Western States, that's a relic. And I hope to see more of those, but man, I doubt we're going to have much more of that on that particular Grand Slam. That's why the Rocky Mountain Slam's there and all of that, but that was fun.
Right. Like you said, the biggest hurdle of that one is just pure entry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunate. Okay. We now have a hotline, and that hotline is Run More 649, just like the old days of radio shows, they'd had to have some clever way for you to remember it. But that used to mean something because we all had 10-key phones or rotary phones. I recall calling 96.1 KSCS, I think, in Fort Worth to request Garth Brooks. And they would have you remember it by word. So we're Run More 649, but you can call 786-667. Wait, no, is that right? Yeah. 786-667-3649. That's Run More 649, and leave us a message. You can text. It's way less interesting, to be honest, because I don't want to read your text. I want to hear your voice. But when you leave the message, we are going to play it. Like, you leave the message and your comment belongs to me, and we're going to play it on the show and
you got to
give our feedback.
You got to sing it like a jingle, like that 8675309. You got to come up with you're the king of little like riffs.
Of course. I will write a jingle for the phone number because I can never remember it outside of Run More 649. Okay. I don't know if I can get it by next week, but I'm going to try real hard to have it by the time this episode airs. If not, look for that soon. I love that challenge. Okay. So let's go for it. you're going to hear these for the first time. I've heard them to make sure that they're somewhat reasonably appropriate, but I've tried to refrain from engaging with them and thinking through them too much. And you all are a part of an experiment here, but we want you to call them. We want you to call the number. We really want to engage with you in this way on air. So I'm going to play this, and then Brian and I are going to think through it.
Hey, this is Sam D with the Bad Runner's Take. If I wear an iPhone, well, I guess an iOS Ultra on my trail run, how much am I looked down upon? But seriously, we're just building the Wilder app, and we want to know a little bit more about Garmin, Coros, or iOS. What are you using? What do you got? And seriously, am I a dad bod poser wearing this Ultra? Probably am.
I will say, okay, so that's Sam DeRegger partnering with me on Wilder. He's my head of product. I love that dude. I didn't ask him to do this, but we do. Strava does have a problem. But bottom line, his question, and I think it's a good question. I think it's an unfortunately real question in the community because we want to be accepted, we want to be included. He's not wearing a Coros. He's not wearing a Garmin. He's wearing an Apple Watch Ultra. What's your take on watches? Like, never mind Strava. What's your take on he's wearing that? He asked, is he a dad bod poser? The answer is unequivocally, yes, he is. But is this why?
The watch, I think it probably just says that you've come into the sport relatively recent and you never owned a GPS watch before a smartwatch. So for me, like I didn't have like
interesting.
You know what I mean? Like for me, like it was reverse. Like I've always had a running watch for running before smartwatches were a thing. So for me, it was like I was already in the Garmin ecosystem when the Apple Watch came out, and I thought it was hilarious that they were touting this ultra Apple Watch and its mega battery, and then my Garmin's like 10x what that is, right? So it just kind of tells that you're probably relatively newer, or if not, then you just prioritize like being able to, make and receive phone calls on your watch, which I wish my Garmin did. I don't think they'll ever have cellular capabilities, but it just either shows that you're new or you've got different priorities.
That's a really good take. I think the reason I didn't adopt, I just looked it up. The first Apple Watch was April 2015. The reason I didn't adopt or was not interested in going there because I was already wearing my Garmin 235 probably at the time. I can't remember. And I loved it. That was also part of my identity. And so I think for our era, let's call ourselves the Billy Yang, Chris McDougall era. There's no chance I would have put on an Apple Watch because that Garmin was a part of who we were. It worked with Strava the way that we needed it to, even if it was clumsy at times. But you're exactly right. It tells something about the sport. Seeing the Apple Watch out there. I mean, Scott Jurek, I think he was sponsored by Apple Watch, or he was a big part of their launch plan. I don't think it worked. But the Apple Watch, I like what you're saying. It's simply evidence of a likely entry point into the sport, because if you were before 2015, that'd be a real hard switch to make. But I'd be curious what other people think. Were you around back then, but now you love the Apple Watch Ultra? I bought it and I couldn't. It was too much. It was just too much technology in my watch. I don't want all of the things that came with it at this point. So
right. Yeah, that's a great point. But something I never thought about. So I love that.
That's good.
Keep calling in.
Yeah, please. Run more 649. That's Run more 649. All right, here's a new one.
Hey, Josh. I'm calling because I'm interested in your thoughts as an entrepreneur about Strava's recent announcement about shutting down and restricting access to a lot of the data that's currently available via their API. So there is a great article by DC Rainmaker breaking down a lot of those changes that I think you should check out. And I guess what I'm looking to hear your thoughts on is, do you think this is a smart move by Strava? Do you predict that this move is more of them trying to eliminate some of their competition or other apps to make room for similar functionality on their own platform? Just really interested in hearing your thoughts. So, yeah, thanks. Love the podcast. Calling from Chicago.
Yes. Hey, and as you call and leave these messages, if you want to say things like first time, long time, that would mean the world to me. I used to call into radio shows in the early 2000s, political radio shows. And, that was just part of the lingo. I've been, first time calling, long time listener. I love that stuff. Thank you, Chicago. I couldn't quite pick up the first name. Did you?
Was it Tom?
Tom or Sean from Chicago?
Yeah.
I apologize if it's neither of those.
Right.
But okay, so
sure. Now he's going to leave another Bad Runners take on us, not knowing
how dumb we are. Well, we know that. Okay, we've never given a shout out, and I haven't been on the website in a long time. DC Rainmaker, that is a really great resource. You've probably all heard of it. It's an exhaustive resource on. At least I went to it for gear reviews. And so this article that he's talking about is an article that on DC Rainmaker where he's pretty hard on Strava for the changes to their API. What that means practically for everyone listening is that Strava is now like the only source of Strava information. You're not going to really be able to attach your Strava account to other things like coaching websites. So if you are currently being coached by somebody and that somebody wants to attach your Strava output to the coaching app to aggregate all of that information and to be able to better coach you, I think that's if it's not already done, I mean, they're pulling that plug quick. With the app, go ahead.
Yeah. So what we're basically saying is that an app that's 100% reliant on third-party data,
yes,
is now shutting down the ability for you to share the data that you're sharing with it, right? Like it's insane, the hypocrisy or the business model of this. Like if you went and if you pitch this idea to your kids or your wife or your employer, right? Like, I'm going to need you to share all of this with me. And then once it becomes mine, I am now no longer going to share it with anybody else. Like, that's insane.
Yeah. On one level, it's their business. They have 100 million users.
Not anymore.
That account. Yeah. I mean, my dude Scott Hickenlooper, who I really like, he's in Salt Lake. He posted yesterday how he deleted Strava. I don't think it has. Maybe it has something to do with this. He's just, sometimes people set them free and untether themselves from Strava. I go through seasons of that, but I don't know. So Strava has 100 million users, which is, I think, 20%. I think there's something like 500 million users of health and fitness apps worldwide. They have 20% of the worldwide users. So they have their own business. They're welcome to do whatever they want. And they're big, and they'll probably still find a way forward. But on some levels, like all these other apps that were built around it, that's what like, I don't know. It's like this social contract within tech. Like, you allow this API because it gets built upon. So ChatGPT is only really great because it was built upon. It was like a skin on, something else, which was a skin on something else, which is a skin on something else. And so you go all the way back to like the root of that thing. And, Strava is making the assumption that Garmin will always want to play with Strava. If Garmin all of a sudden decides, hey, I'm done playing with Strava too, and they want to kill their API, they want to kill their ability to connect, then Strava is equally as vulnerable to, I think, and this is just me, gut reaction, Strava is equally as vulnerable to Garmin withholding their information from them. Because I think if you reduce, like, where's the first cause? The first cause is the runner running. If that runner decides they want some data, they have to buy a watch. So if Strava doesn't own a watch, which maybe they're positioning themselves to release a watch, but if they don't, they're completely dependent on Coros and Garmin and then the long tail of all the others to play well with them. So those others could be like, hey, you've now ruined our user experience because they relied on the watch to go to Strava. And as Strava was the simple solution to send the data to all of the other, to the coaching apps, to all the other fun stuff that's out there, you're reducing that. Well, we don't need you either. Because ultimately, I don't think does Garmin need Strava? If Strava is not playing well and users aren't liking Strava, Garmin just build its own ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, It's crazy. I mean, Strava's just too big to fail. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's kind of like a financial institution at this point. Like, there's too many people who are dependent on it for, it's like, I mean, it's almost probably like a mental health crisis right now. Like there are people mentally dependent on their Strava upload and their Strava connections because, I mean, you could go and find the same type of data within Garmin or, Coros or Sunto. Like they all have different ways of tracking, the information. And to be honest with us, probably 99% of us don't even need much of Strava's data. It's just entertainment purposes only. It's not actually structured for how we're trying to build our training arc. So if it's just a platform for entertainment, then it seems like we could easily just pull the plug on it and cut the nonsense.
Yeah. I'll go out here and I'll say my official bad take is Garmin's going to release, they're going to get into hardware. There's no way around it. I think they're too vulnerable. They just, sorry. Strava's going to release their own hardware. They're too vulnerable. They've just proven how vulnerable it is to rely on another company. And yet they're totally reliant on these other companies. Unless you record directly from your phone, but then you're missing out on a lot of data that comes from the watch.
Right.
So that's what I think will happen. As a business, I respect it. Do what you got to do. But as a consumer, I haven't been in love with Strava for a long time. And when you go through seasons where you're not running a lot, Strava is a point of is annoying. I hate it. I hate it if I'm not in a big training block because I don't want to look in there and see that I ran 10 miles last week.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Totally.
They've got other problems, but that was a good call. Thanks for that call. In Chicago.
Yes.
All right. We got one more call here. We're gonna check out.
Hey, Josh.
It's a long one.
They tried to catch up with the Devil's Gulch, but apparently I was a day early. Want to do that race next year because I only lived like maybe 40 miles from Wenatchee and grew up around that area, which I think it's totally rad that they're having an ultra up there. Second, just want to comment on the episode of Bad Runner's Take where it was talking about not normalizing DNFs, but kind of rebranding the thought process around a DNF. I thought that was brilliant. As a non-pro, mid to back of the pack runner, I just sometimes just getting this muck and mire of like, oh man, I paid all this money, took all this time away from my family to train, and man, look, I only got 85 miles in, and I'm calling it. And I love the fact that we need to look at like celebrating, man, that's crazy, dude got 85 miles in. Now I would say though, that our local race here, the Badger Mountain Challenge in Kennewick, Washington, you should come check that out. Anyways, they do that. If you get over, 50 miles, because it's a double out and back, if you come back in at the 50 mile and go, I can't go out again, you get a 50-mile finish. We now have a 100K on that one too, so you could go back out to the next mountain range and back and get a 100K finish. So they do that, but it is kind of a double-edged sword because I always find myself coming back into the 50-miler knowing that the finish is 5 miles from my bed, going, I could just call it here and still get this 50-mile finish. So something to think about, but enjoy what you guys are doing. Love Bad Runner's Take and Borderline in general. On the app, I've been trying to use it quite a bit, but in my area, I got to go in and reestablish both of our run clubs here just to make sure we can get all our group runs and stuff on there. Anyhow, like I say, love what you're doing, Josh. Love your music when I can find it. I'm also a musician, bluegrass.
Yeah, the call just cut off. I guess there's a 3-minute limit on there. Anyway, by the time the audience hears this, will be trimmed down just a little bit. Thanks for that call. That was a cool call. Great point. Okay, let me give you this, Brian. This is the opposite. This is something that we're going to actually do at my race. My partner Joey came up with it. At the end of every hard event that we've ever done together, he's always looks at me when we're crossing the finish line and says, how much money would it take for you to go do it all over again? So it's like the inverse of a DNF. It's do it all again at the end of the race. So our race is going to be a 50K, and we're going to offer we haven't nailed down the number, but let's say it's 6 people. You come across the finish line, and if you want to do another 50K, you will get an equivalent of a butler, and we will escort you the 50K to do it again. So rather than setting out to a 50K and only running a half marathon and quitting, we're saying, what if you set out to run a 50K and actually run 100K instead? It's the inverse DNF. Anyway, that episode was very inspiring on a lot of levels to say, why is it only important that we run the amount of distance that we set out to run? Why is that the only thing that's validating if we only do the distance that we set out to run that day? Why is 50 miles not validating when we want 100? And that's what you were trying to flip on its head. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And with the caveat that this applies to like ultra distances, because
right,
you can't normalize 50 miles. You can't normalize 62 miles and beyond, right? Like you certainly can't normalize 100. Like this doesn't go down below the marathon distance. Like nobody's talking about this in relationship to a half marathon or a 10K. Like, no, you get those ones done or you don't. But yeah, the ultra marathon distance it's wild to, conceptualize the distances that you've got to run just to get a finish. And I think my own personal experience with getting into ultras, it was a small fat ass that my buddy Chris Futter organized as a training run for himself in preparation for a 100-miler. And he told me to hop in. And it was an intended out and back, basically 100K distance. And we left from his house and traversed through the mountainous trails and would come back, right? And so I said, dude, I'll go with you. Like at that time, I had never ran a marathon. And so I was like, are there some drop points? Like I'll maybe try and get the 50K in. And then he's like, yeah, my wife will be following us. You can pull out whenever you want. Dude, there was something so powerful about going in and celebrating the marathon distance, and then a little bit longer the 50K distance, a little bit longer the 100K distance, or the 50-mile distance, and then the 100K distance, and getting it all done. Knowing that I didn't have to do the 100K, but it was building momentum on the day. That was a different experience than if I just knew it was 100K or bust. So
that is cool.
I don't hear many runners, right, celebrating within the 100K or 100 mile, like, hey, I just completed a 50K. You don't do that. Like allow yourself to stop in that race and celebrate. Like I just got the 50K under my belt. I just got the 50 miler under my belt, right? Like you've got to give yourself those wins rather than saying, God, I'm still 35 miles away from my finish.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. And I appreciate that call. More of those calls, please.
Yeah.
These are fun to tend to hear that you all are really engaging. Let's see, I can do this now. Thanks. All right. What else? Do we have anything else before we wrap up today?
I think that's it, man. I think, we're going to roll right into December here in no time. So it's going to go by quick.
Ready? Year-end top 10 lists are going to be all over the place, but we'll probably end up with something that's like a legit list of some kind. I saw someone making fun of top 10 lists, someone in the industry making fun of them in the last day or so, and it made me want to do like 100 top 10 lists and send them all to them, because if you don't like them, just don't listen.
Right. It'll be fun. Yeah, we'll definitely have our own unique take on top 10 lists. I promise it won't just be your basic approach at, the favorite running gear that half of it you probably haven't ran in more than just the one time that you needed to, opine on it.
Yeah, it'll be fun to come up with that. But until then, hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving, and look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, man. We'll see you guys.
All right.